speaking, so to get it from the horse's mouth, the kid wasn't kicked off the track team, but he wasn't allowed to participate in track that day, or
Correct.
am I missing something? He was kicked off for that day? Or-
Correct. He was not allowed to ride the bus to go to Eagle River.
So he wasn't allowed to participate in track,
That meet,
that meet?
correct.
So he was essentially kicked off for one meet, right?
No, I mean, he was supposed
So
to.
he wasn't?
He was supposed to come back to practice next day.
Without the hair?
I'm sorry?
Without the hair, or?
The hair wasn't a problem in school or at practice.
Just at the meet, or was there? Am I missing something? Was he
Okay.
not allowed to go because of the hair, or, I don't know.
I mean, we can talk about this here, but this is really what you, if you want to talk about it, you should go to our committee to talk about it, but I don't know if all of you know Joby Sullivan, but our track coach is standing right there. You wanna raise your hand? And he's new to our area and, has a lot of potential to be a coach for many years. And I don't know how many of you have been involved in athletics. You know, my daughter's over there, goes from one hockey team to another team, and she has 4 layers of uniform that she has to wear at all times. She gets admonished for wearing black pants instead of blue pants. One coach, she has to wear ties for. Everybody has to dress up. Next coach, you go in flip-flops. Some coaches believe that going to a sporting event where there's multiple other schools that were representing the West Iron School District, and they're concerned about how they look representing our school district. Some people are more concerned with how they look as an individual. This committee is kind of set up, and what our code currently says is excessive hairstyles. What that means to me, or maybe the football coach has a different opinion than our new track coach. Basically what it comes down to is building team unity as opposed to individual. And it's like putting your names, some coaches put names on the back of jerseys, some coaches don't. Gary told me about playing for Brooke Smith. And he's kind of old, so you may not remember this. You had to, he put out a list of rules which included wearing galoshes, if anybody knows what those are. And if you didn't wear galoshes, you couldn't play. So balancing this coach's desire to have team and team unity against what a person's individual rights are is a really gray area. And it's subject to interpretation, and we've asked the people on this committee and the people of the public to try to help us with it.
I'm not saying it was right or wrong.
Right.
I'm not saying because of his hair, because of the shirt he wore, whatever the rules are is fine, but I just want it stipulated whether he was removed from the team that day or not.
And this discussion about the hair started the day before. And things were said in regards to that. The expectation was that he wasn't coming on the bus with the hair.
So was he removed from the team that day or not?
He did not get on the bus, he was not allowed to get on the bus to go to Eagle River for that meet with the hair.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
As we're talking about Mr. Joby, I'm sorry, I don't know what.
Sullivan.
Mr. Sullivan, weren't you also, one of the assistant coaches on the football team?
Yes, I was.
And didn't he have a mohawk for the football team?
No.
And nobody had a problem then, so I'm not understanding why he wasn't allowed to get on the bus with the same mohawk, but besides it was pink.
Okay.
That's,
And that goes back to coaches and rules, but
but I'm saying he was on
he
the
had a
football team as
mohawk at the
well.
municipal game. It was about this high and it was dark blue.
And I didn't have a problem with it as a coach.
Well, I'm just pertaining as he was also on the football team, and now he's track coach. I'm not seeing where,
Well,
I don't
the only
think any
difference
member
is,
of the public saw his
I did.
short blue mohawk.
I guess the only difference is I called the shots in the football. I don't call the shots during the track. bother me that he had that. I probably had one other boy, I would assume had it one too, but I can't remember what color it was.
And right, to each his own, we totally understand that. It's, you know, there's other ways that you could have just expressed your thing for cancer, but it's all the sports, you know.
He's a kid.
Yeah, he's a kid.
Yes,
When I thought about this a lot too, as far as we have a new coach, and he may most definitely have his own feelings and what he wants for his team, and that's wonderful. However, the ultimate decision in this came down to Mr. Burley, whether to let him or, you know, discuss it between themselves. It was ultimately your decision. Maybe it would have been best if these kids were sat down ahead of time, I don't know, and told exactly the way it was gonna be, so this problem automatically would have been.
and when I was talking to Gary about the Brooks Smith rules on the first day of practice, you got the pages of rules. And that's true, and that's part of the reason we have the committee, and maybe the committee will recommend that individual coaches can then have their own individual rules. But being on a number of sports teams, and coaching when I first arrived back here, you kind of understand this team concept. And it's a tough gray area to mesh together, especially today. Yes?
I graduated 2 years ago, and I had Mrs. Burley as the ski coach. And we had an incident, and I was called into Mr. Burley's office to discuss what happened. But how is that fair to be called into an office of a husband and a wife to discuss with nobody else in there what happened
Between exams.
in between exams? I
Mr.
can't even
Thompson,
talk
you
about it
want
to
to
this day.
say what you had to say to me on the phone that day about what you were supposed to do after I did turn in a written
And then we
complaint?
met after that, I believe, Mr. Lapp, didn't we? We met in my office.
We talked on the phone and your words were, you don't have to do anything and you certainly don't have to tell me what you do.
No, I don't think I said that. No.
I was there, and he most certainly did say that, and that, all this hearsay, or whatever Mr. Polich likes to call it, there's a big problem, whether anybody wants to address it or not, there is a problem. And, you know, that, you guys need to just go forward and work that out. There's just way too many people out there with those same kind of complaints, and
I would just like to say that personally, for any students who've had issues, it's intimidating to think that you're gonna make any difference in anything when it's, I mean, to be called into an office and to discuss something between two people who have already obviously talked about it or whatever. It's intimidating, and it creates just a harsh learning environment for you. And to go through my junior and senior year of school worried about, you know, what would happen.
I'm sorry you went
that's a
through that.
problem.
Are you done, dear?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I just have a question, and maybe not even pertains to all this necessarily, but you said there's a line between a complaint and, you know, disciplinary action. What is that, and who decides that? Because if you get 100 complaints on one person, but they're not bad enough to be disciplined for, but you get 100 complaints, who decides what's?
Well, nobody has 100 complaints, but
You just said you had a bunch of emails, kind of, you know, complaints.
Well, that was
Well,
all
how would
about-
you,
that was
that's
all
what I
about
mean, so
take
where do you
care.
draw the line, what is an email, what's a complaint, when do they get disciplined for it?
that's a determination that the administration and the board makes in regards to the seriousness of it, and the superintendent makes a recommendation to the board in regards to the level of necessary discipline. It goes from the superintendent to the personnel committee to the board.
Because that would be nice to know what you consider bad and what somebody else considers.
Well, it's,
When they're
It's actually a specialized area of the law in regards to the tenure commission that the teachers have to hear when teachers, and you go through the grievance procedure and the arbitration procedure, and then you have the tenure commission that in regards to discipline or terminating teachers in regards to all their rights that they have. And it's very complicated. That doesn't mean people should, if you have complaints, make them. About anybody. Yes?
I'm assuming that you have policies and procedures here, correct?
I,
I'm assuming you have policies and procedures here, correct?
for what?
For how to run, disciplinary, anything like that?
Yeah, there's actually so many of them, it's hard to keep track of, because they come from all different sources.
So do you have policies and procedures on how to deal with what she's saying?
Oh, yes,
Are they public? Like,
Sure.
can we go and see them somewhere?
sure.
Where, or do we have to request them?
Just send an email to the administration. The teacher, it's a hard one to answer, because on teacher discipline, it comes from, we have board policy, we have a union contract, and then there's state statutes on top of all that. So it's hard to put it all together, because they come from different sources.
And I'm not saying just, I'm just saying in general. I just wanted to know how your policies and procedures work.
Yes, sir.
In regards to Miss Lapp speaking, her incident happened 4 years ago, and you can see how greatly affected she still is. She drove down from Marquette today, and I feel so badly for her, because something that happened under your watch, whoever was administration at the time, whoever was on the board, this is a young lady who still struggles with that, and I think that needs to be taken with the most seriousness, as we're saying that there are kids that are complaining and there are kids that are afraid to complain. And I think you really need to weigh the dire consequences of that. When I look at this young lady who drove down here today, still scared to come here 4 years later and talk about what happened to her.
I couldn't agree with you more, but having said that, I'm aware of her accolades in regards to her ski season when she was a senior, and Marissa works in my office, and I wasn't aware of either of these things.
So why is that though? Why would nobody else be brought in when it's
Wait a second, you weren't aware of what happened with her?
No,
And I called you and you would not return the call?
I wouldn't return your call.
I called you, you were in your office, your secretary said you would call me, and I waited and no call. And that was after Mr. Thompson did absolutely nothing.
I have no recollection of that. The best way to talk to me is email, because of my schedule, but if I did, I apologize.
And
Yes.
pertaining to Marissa, it wasn't with a teacher. It was, and he handled everything the way he should have. I commend Mr. Brody for his actions that he had taken with Marissa. I'm just saying, as far as these kids, I know how Marissa dealt with being bullied. And I'm telling you, it's not something that you take lightly when your kids come home and are too afraid to say something. And I can guarantee if you went and asked, numerous students took them aside outside of this area and actually said, you don't have to be afraid, tell me exactly what's going on. I can guarantee you would have a book right there completely full of verbal against this teacher. And that they're too afraid to say something because of the consequences that they have, how many more years here and what's gonna happen to them.
Well, I've talked to a number of people that I asked them to put things around. Not necessarily about any individual, and people don't want to do it.
Because they're afraid. They're afraid of the consequences that they're gonna have.
Well, yeah, the kids have to deal with it, the parents have to deal with it for how many years?
Yes.
Just a couple of quick comments, and this is to address the whole board. I know I'm speaking to you, but I know they're intently listening, and I do appreciate that. And as adults, all of us in the room, it's a horrible thing, no matter which direction it comes from, whether it's coming from another child or internally and whatever, it's horrible. I think we all are in agreement to that. And I just hope that again, and I'm not saying anything negatively about anyone in particular, but I just hope that everybody realizes what's said today, what things you say have actions later down the road and carries with them. And so you go on about your business not thinking that, oh, that kid's got it. I never, I would have bet everything I owned that my daughter would have never been afraid, ever. You know, and when she made the comment to me, it just concerned me. Am I picking on her and on Mrs. Baruti? Not at all. But I am disappointed in one thing, and I'm gonna bring this up only because Mr. Thompson, in my conversation with me, asked me, have you spoken to Mrs. Baruti? And I said, no, not yet. And he said, I'm going to ask her to call you. To this day, she hadn't. And I would have thought, as a coach, and knowing that I placed my concern, which I'm sure you passed along, I would have thought she would have at least called me to clear the air. Am I mad at her? No. I wasn't there. I'm upset with the fact that my daughter, and I'm not speaking for all the track members, I'm speaking for my child, because I am her best advocate, and I know her better than anybody else. And I was disheartened by the way that it was handled, and that's my comment. And as far as you go, I want to let you know I did call members right away early on, and I also emailed, I believe, every board member except one who doesn't have email, and just asked what the process was to go on the agenda. I had the wherewithal to do that, but I want to let you know I was only received a response by Tuesday. I didn't hear back from you nor anybody else on how to do that. And I also made calls to senators, congressmen, Board of Education, State Board of Education, not to get anybody in trouble, but to educate myself on how things work, so I knew. And I was kind of upset because I was told that in the state of Michigan, administrators or administration is governed by the board, which is great, that's wonderful, I get how it works. But when I did call to be put on the agenda or ask about it, I found it ironic that Mr. Thompson makes the decisions on who or what goes on the agenda, and I'm thinking, well, if that be the case, how do you folks ever hear when I'm not able to make contact? So that was my concern, and I hope.
That's not what the rules said.
What was that?
That's not what the rules said.
Oh, well, that's what I was informed by the congressman or senator's office, that that's how that works.
Our rule requires that the request go to Mr. Thompson and myself, and from there I copy the board and inform them of.
Okay, but I just wanted to put that out there because that's what my interpretation was of it, and I'm glad that you educated me on that.
And this goes back to kind of the other question is that the statute will tell you can do this, and then a union contract will tell you can do this, and then we have our own board policies that have to comply with both of those, but sometimes you can make it a little bit this way or that way and still comply with the rest.
And I wanna.
So we have a policy, and you have to go on the website to get them all now. Everything's on the website, but of the policymaker. But there's a policy there that says the agenda items are to be submitted to the superintendent, and the board president handle those requests.
Okay, and I want to commend all the parents that came out today, whether you had a complaint about whatever issue it is or a concern. I think it's wonderful that everybody did, everybody comes out. You have a right to be heard and you have a right to your opinions, obviously. And they need to, and the board needs to hear them, otherwise they can't address them. And like I said earlier, when I was speaking, if I have to come to everyone, I will, because I want to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't ever happen again. Not that, there was anything horrible or terrific, per se that happened, but just consequences that came of one particular action. And I do commend Sarah for reaching out and talking to different people, because obviously there are things that did go unsaid. I can't, speak to anything else, but I do think that she served a purpose. And one thing about social media is, me in particular, I don't know 90% of these people, or maybe 95% of the people in this room. But it was one way to listen to. Did I always comment? No. But I listened and I read what people said. Am I adult enough to pick and choose and decide what's what? Yeah, because I'm a parent. So, just like you with your position. But everyone deserves their right to be heard and to say what they feel, and should never be disregarded. And I'm glad to know that this board is always willing to listen to that, so you all heard that as well. So don't take it lightly.
And the rules say we're supposed to restrict public comment to 30 minutes.
Yeah, sorry.